is my great pleasure to introduce to you all Emily Greenquist, a very close friend of mine and just an exciting person all around. Emily is the author of an ebook, Disease is a Mirror, a lyric memoir, a poetic examination and reconstruction of self through the reflection of a life-changing medical diagnosis. Her writing appears in Syracuse University's Word Gathering, a journal of disability poetry and literature, Prepity and or Tronies, Nebulous Magazine, and Laughing Eye, Weeping Eyes, the Colorful Tears Tarot Guidebook. Emily is also one-third of Brooch, a fashion poetics blog with collaborators Olivia Cronk and Katrina Underwood. More of her work can also be found at emilygreenquist.com. That's GreenQuist, Greenquist.com. I am finally so delighted to have her on this program where we're going to be discussing transformations, acts of creativity, and of course, her memoir, Disease is a Mirror. Emily, welcome to the show.
Oh my goodness, that was such a wonderful intro. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you. So I always like to, this is a little bit of a fun, Kickstarter question, but the one thing that I always like to ask people when I have them on the program is, what is your relationship to radio? I know that is kind of a slightly antiquated medium, so to speak, in this age of streaming, but what is your earliest memory of radio and how do you relate to it?
Oh my God. So I'm going to age myself, but growing up, driving around Milwaukee, Wisconsin in the 90s, I did have a car. My grandfather sold a car to me and my dad for me to drive for $1. Bless his heart. So did not have tape player, certainly well before the CD player. I guess maybe after the other, I don't know. I only had radio. That's all I had. So when I was bumping around the neighborhood and going places and I was turning up the music, it was based on what was on the radio. And I think it was I'm going to forget the number, but was it Z100 or 700 or something like that. I've listened to the local rap station and also NPR and radio was all I could do when I was driving around.
Excellent. It was just about to ask you what your local station was that you had. How old was the car? Did the car even have presets? Were you able to jump in between your favorite stations, or did you have to dial every single time?
I honestly, I don't remember. It could have. I don't know. And now I'm thinking it was 700. I cannot remember the name of the station. I'm sure it's still around, but yeah.
I just love one of my favorite things of all time is cruising around and finding the local stations and what they're called. Because I remember our hip hop station in North Carolina was 102 Jams,
nice.
Which was great. And then we had 101 or 100.3 The Buzzard, which was our dad rock station.
Nice.
That was the classic rock one. So I always love how radio stations, especially local ones, kind of advertise themselves, what the gimmick is, who the morning talk show hosts are. There's just such a personality to radio stations.
Yeah. And I had a radio station very briefly. I went to Beloit College and they had a college radio station and I had a show. You had mentioned Olivia Cronk. She and I are part of that Brooch group and she had a radio station. It was jazz and I would tag along on occasion. And then when she graduated, I had my own jazz station for a bit. So that was a lot of fun.
Amazing. Okay, so I want to let you fully indulge in your hipster street cred here. What was your favorite thing that you either discovered or played while you were DJing on the jazz station, and or what is your since we are we're on WZRD, we're doing freeform radio, what would your be going back to 90s Emily, what would be the one really niche song that you would have loved to have heard or played on the radio while you were cruising around Milwaukee?
Oh, okay. So I feel all of this, I bless you for suggesting I can lead into my street cred because I feel that is stolen valor. It is absolute stolen valor. particularly because like my knowledge of jazz is and was pretty limited. So it was an exercise in Emily going through the stacks, finding things that were jazz related and putting them on and just hoping that they were good, you know? So like again, like Stolen Valor because Coltrane's A Love Supreme. Still love that song, but it's so well known. It's like not not even remotely like B-sides like, oh, well, did you hear this version of whatever, you know, like completely Stolen Valor. But I, in fact, like I did something so like uncool. Like
Oh my God, what did you do?
I commandeered one of the uh one of my I was supposed to be doing jazz music and I was just like, you know
Hmm.
what? My boyfriend's birthday is coming up. I'm just gonna do like a playlist for him and just like tell him I love him and like play songs for him. And I got so much crap for that because like that's not cool. You're here to play jazz. Like, what do you so like yeah, like I was playing like Nina Sherry's Buffalo Stance and like all kinds of other things that were just absolutely not jazz, but like
That's hilarious. Did people call in? Did people complain?
actually, like I remember either they called in or they like I had a stern talking to like soon after and absolutely correct. Like that's just that was me and my ego like sharing my life with the world is like completely unnecessary. So and then meanwhile like I had other people calling in like, "Oh, thanks for playing this song," but like that's just wasn't what it was supposed to be. So again,
No, no,
yeah.
I love the slight rebellion at the pirate radio jazz station, taking it over, playing alternative music. I just, yeah, this is. I feel like that if anyone was listening to that, just like cruising through and like dialing in, I think that that's awesome. The only people you're going to make mad are the people that are just like, okay, 6 o'clock, it's jazz time. I'm tuning
Yeah.
into the jazz station.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So yeah, given the chance again, would you repeat? Would you still do it?
Like just have a radio station.
Yeah, given the chance to be back on, as a DJ, would you ever want to do it?
So I think I would love to. Like I'm constantly sending songs to friends, which you are absolutely aware of. I think I don't have the consistency for it though. Like I would love to do just like a night in, you know, a radio station and putting things together. But the consistency that you and the others in your world do, I just I think I would just like start repeating stuff. Like I'm just not as cool as you guys.
Yeah, see that's the interesting thing is I feel like given freeform radio is so broad in what you can and cannot play. Like I think that's really interesting is how different wizards, especially on the station, have incorporated that. I know there are a lot of people that are like, oh yeah, I mean they're a little bit more familiar with the way that radio works as a medium of it's okay to repeat yourself because I played this once 3 weeks ago and maybe people didn't hear it or I'm really playing what you're in the mood for what you're digging is I think is the key and I think that that's always so exciting. I don't know, maybe we'll get you back on, do a
Okay.
little guest slot. And it's worth noting that for your reading piece today of all the music has been curated and suggested by you for this. How did you go about picking the songs that you wanted to pair with your excerpts today?
Thank you. I had so much fun putting that together. I was just trying to get in a mood and you and I connected a couple times. There was a couple iterations here, but can I share what your suggestions, like your prompts?
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
Okay. So I'm gonna butcher this because I'm not gonna remember it exactly, but you are very familiar with the book, and you and I were kind of talking through what we wanted to share here. And your off the dome prompts for something like Natasha Lyonne, um, Memory by Way of Dreams, and I'm forgetting what the third one was, but like I kind of loved that idea of just having a vibe, having a mood. So I picked songs that are either a few of them are not in English, and there's one at least that's in gibberish, and some don't have words at all. And just things that kind of get me into that creative zone of just like, where am I right now?
Yeah, yeah. I'm so excited for to hear the response because yeah, the music selection is very, very effective for I believe the excerpts that you've chosen to share with us today. But I feel like I'm burying the lead a little bit here. We are here mostly to discuss your work on this book, Disease is a Mirror, a lyric memoir, which is just a fantastic title. Um, One of the things that we were going to discuss, and I wanted to throw out there, obviously, I have kind of given us a little bit of lead time here with discussing music and radio. That's my way of like beginning and starting things, is I always like to start with something really, really quotidian. Everyone loves music. Everyone has a favorite song. When you are approaching starting things or just beginning things in general, do you have a little ritual or do you have things that you like to start with? How do you like to begin things?
Um, Tough to answer. So I think I have a very specific thing that started me writing this book, but it's like it wasn't a ritual, it was just an event that kind of happened. I could sort of share that.
Please do. Please do.
Okay. So Disease is a Mirror is about my diagnosis experience. And before I got the diagnosis, I was experiencing an odd sensation. I had a leg that had gone numb, and I was having a hard time walking. I was walking with a cane. We didn't know what it was. It could have been a pinched nerve. We weren't sure. And I was doing physical therapy at home, and just like doing my best. Like in uncertain times, I'm like lighting a candle, trying to make physical therapy better. But I'm just massively struggling with the ability to just lift a leg and put it back down, lift a leg and put it. It was just, I'm crying. One of the, like, I would often cry during my physical therapy sessions because like I couldn't really move my leg and I didn't know what was happening. So one of those times, my husband came into the room that I was doing this exercise, and he just started playing his guitar. Like I was doing the exercise in our bedroom. He's just sitting on the bed. I've got this candle going, and he's playing guitar. And I just felt like this was him serenading me. I just felt like romance and love from him. And I'm just like, I can do this. Is okay. I have a support system. I have love in my life. I can figure this out. We're going to get this sorted. And after that physical therapy session, I just started writing. I was like, I have a book in me. This is it. Like, I wrote about, and the scene is in the book, about that moment with my husband. And that scene is in the first section of the second chapter, because when I was thinking about in terms of like, where does one start? Again, I don't know what my diagnosis is at that point, but I just like I was like, let me just write this all down. What happened on what day? When did the leg go numb? Before that, there was pain. Before that, I went on a poetry trip. Before that, I had a cold. Before that, like, and it just started like going back and back and back. And this illness seemed connected to like not just these specific events that happened within that month or so. And all of this sort of happened over many months, but it also is connected to some of my earliest memories and my connection with illness in general and my connection with my loved ones. And so it's been tricky. I have throughout the book, I just list, maybe this was the beginning of the story. Maybe it was that tarot reading that I went to that talked about illness. Maybe it was, it could have started anywhere. And so I just kind of picked one of my beginnings and tried to lay it out from there. But as I say in the book, I start with what it isn't. And that's a timeline, setting a date and time for each of these instances. The experience itself just can't be boiled down to like this happened and this happened. It's just all omnipresent. It's all part of the dreams. It's all part of like every moment of my life was kind of connected to this one like life-changing diagnosis.
I think that that's beautiful. It's interesting to me to hear you when you're discussing it, because I have known you as a multifaceted creative, right? Someone that writes poetry, someone that does visual art, collage, film work, even video game development. I know that you've had a multifaceted journey within creativity. So it's interesting to hear me say, you said I have a book in me. Did you know
Yes.
that from that first night that you were sitting there like, I got to get this out. I need to start writing? Or was there a moment where things started to kind of like form and shape where you're like, oh, this is something? Like, when did you kind of click in, I guess? Or did it just all pour out of you at once?
I immediately knew this was a book because I think you're right. Like I do work in a lot of different medium. And sometimes when I'm creating something like, what is this? What does this need to be? Is it a sentence? And it just needs to be a sentence that lives in the world and that I put on a refrigerator? Or is this like is this concept a collage I need to make? Or is it just a word I need to say to someone? Or like what does it need to be? And for whatever reason, I just like immediately knew it was a book. And I felt this immediate need to share, and which is very unlike me, very unlike me. Because I think I mentioned this. I think it's clear in the book that I am an introvert. I am a recluse. I am sitting in a room where my curtains are completely closed and like I can see out, but other people can't see in. So but I felt this particular story and even like the really personal, like hard stories that were connected to it, like had to be shared. I just felt that this was a book that needed and it needed to be shared. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no. That's excellent, and I'm glad that you felt the need to share it. I know that as a fellow introvert, I feel like self-expression, especially when it comes to creativity, is very interesting. I was going to ask you, was there any initial discomfort? Obviously, this is flowing out of you. You know, this is a book. It has to, like, I need to get this out, and I feel like it's going to be important to share with people. Was there ever a moment while you were writing that's like, ooh, well, that's going to be uncomfortable to share? Or, when you're really putting that much skin in the game, you're writing a memoir, you're writing something very personal, as you mentioned earlier. This is something that's connecting to more and more pieces of your, like the totality of your life.
Mm-hmm.
Was there ever a moment where, you discovered something while writing where you were like, I have a question of whether or not, did you ever have a doubt of like, should I share this part? Should I share this part?
Absolutely, many times. And one in particular is pretty interesting. It ties to the title of the book. So my first iteration of it, I wrote down like the story with my husband. I wrote down the story of the train. I wrote down a bunch of different stories that weren't connected yet. And I mentioned her earlier, but Olivia Cronk, again, a poet friend of mine, I was like, I've never written a book before. These are some ideas I have. She has written many books and they're wonderful. And I was like, do you have it in your heart? Can you read this and tell me, do you agree? Is there a book here? And my title at the time, there wasn't a title, but on the title page, let's say, I had this thing, I had like MS:me or MS:EM, because short for Emily, just like this idea of like interconnecting MS and myself. And Olivia wrote this comment like, oh, this is interesting. You're kind of making this about a mirror, like as if disease is a mirror. I was like, oh my God, that is 100% the title. Bless you. So I have to give her that credit. And she read a later version of the book and she's just like, yeah, I don't see how disease is a mirror is that title. It doesn't seem connected anymore.
Interesting.
And the reason why she thought that is because I knew why Disease is a Mirror was like the absolute perfect story, but I hadn't shared the story yet about the mirror and my dad, and being able
Mm.
to like do that very literal self-reflection. And it was such a personal story. I was like, crap, like I know why she thinks this isn't the right title. Like, and I know that it is the right title. I know it's a part of me and my history, and I have not shared that information. I have to share that information because it is a part of this particular healing journey. So,
Yeah, there. I forget who said this, but there was some artist creative that very much was a person that was saying, if you're not in, if there isn't a part where you're sharing this where you feel like, oh, there's at least one person I would be embarrassed to share this with, you're not really putting your skin in the game. You're not really putting yourself out there. Was
yeah.
there a person or people for you that you were most nervous to like, I guess, for lack of a better word, expose yourself to in this way?
Yeah, what do now it's like, okay, what do I even want to share? I think I have had I've had so many different stages in my life, and I'm so curious if some of these folks have read this book. Like, I'm wondering if people from my high school have read this because that was kind of a difficult time for me. I'm wondering, maybe this is all related to school. Like, I'm wondering if people from when I went back to school for game design, I wonder if they have read that because these are all very different stages in my life. So yeah, I'm kind of curious if the cool kids have read the cool kids in my
Yeah.
life who I like, or those that I just have held in esteem and I've always felt like less than in front of. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there's something so interesting to me about going back to what Olivia originally said without the mirror scene.
Hmm.
There is something very tactile to me about, now having read the final memoir, and obviously we were sharing one of the excerpts is titled "I Am," and I
Hmm.
always, even I agree that that excerpt with your father and the mirror and the bedtime ritual, I is so important to the novel. But I do see there are elements throughout this, as you say, it's connecting all of these pieces from way, way back, even before your diagnosis. Um, and this I am statement comes out. You said, I am this, I am this. What was it like to sit down and kind of see the web of you, all of these
Hmm.
different I ams? What was it like to have the act of having to kind of define yourself, or reflect upon these things?
Yeah, it had a lot of components to it. So one, again, this I am section, so this is the story on the train, was again one of the earlier things I wrote down. I had literally never told anyone that story. Like I had
Mm.
friends in high school that I could have easily shared this with them, did not. My husband didn't know this story. A lot of people were just like, wait, did this actually happen? I'm like, yeah, here's the piece of paper of this image that I was handed. So it was like, but I felt this need to share that. I think that was sort of the start of me to start sort of opening up and sharing like who I am. And in the process of having this illness, I was, walking with a cane. And so that begs the question. A lot of people around me who care about me, or, regardless of the level of how intimate we are, like how well we know each other, we're just like, are you okay? Like, what is happening here? And that was really challenging for me to reconcile as, again, someone who's very private. Let's just talk about the weather, let's just talk
Mm.
about like some game somebody watched. Like, but we're talking about like a health issue. And for a long time there, I didn't know. My answer was like, I don't know. Like, so I had to kind of reconcile how I want to, tackle those conversations. And that's a part of me coming into like, okay, who am I then? Like, how do I communicate this? What do I want to share? What does that look like? So it was kind of an exercise of me just like in real time having to make decisions about who I am and how I want to communicate, while also just going through the exercise of sharing facets of myself and my stories.
Was there uh, any episodes that you yourself had forgotten, that kind of like ghosts that reappeared while you were in this process of kind of just writing this book?
You
Is
know,
there anything that
yes,
kind of surprised you?
trying to think here. Yes and no. Like I recently had a conversation with someone about how like one's child self is different from one's adult self. And, we need to like love and honor and forgive, any mistakes the child self has made as they were like learning and figuring things out, because now I'm the adult that I need to be. And I sometimes grapple with that separation because like part of me feels like I am still that kid. And when I was the kid, I was also the adult, so like it all feels connected to me already. So a lot of these stories weren't of like, oh, I remember that. It was just like they're kind of always with me. And it's like, which ones am I willing to share?
Mm, yeah. Did it through the act of sharing? So one of the things that I really love about the book itself is that, kind of going back to this I am, and the way that we use art to kind of, as you to use your metaphor, reflect upon ourselves, but also to kind of make statements about ourselves. This happened. This is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think is really beautiful is how you abstract characters within the book. So you very, very explicitly in the opening introduction, you frame the way that you are going to be talking about and writing in the novel characters through the lens of the Canterbury Tales, which also is your namesake. So everyone is named and defined by their role, sans a couple of characters in there that have given names. When you were writing and when you were working around this concept of like, through this, so much of this is how you perceive yourself and how people perceive you. Was there a version of yourself basically before writing this book? And then was there a transformation of the way that you perceived yourself through writing this that has now kind of been incorporated into your life post book, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so it was an incredibly cathartic experience writing this book. Like I encourage anyone who's going through some major event or something that just feels really important to just write it all down. Whether you share it with others or not, like that's your choice. But the act of writing it was so cathartic for me because I'm like, I would try to just do a brain dump of, okay, what happened there?
Mm-hmm.
I would have an interaction with someone and like, for example, let me think here. So, you know, the story of me doing the EMG NCV procedure, that one took multiple iterations where I had like person A, person B, person C, and I like literally did it kind of listed like that. And I was like, well, it just felt like I was kind of trying to dissect what happened. Like, okay, this person represents that, or this person and I was just like, just what happened? Just I needed to sort of distill things down to figure out, okay, what actually happened? And I kind of approached that story and other ones in that way of just kind of getting into a reality of the events as opposed to just like doing this doubling of analysis or whatever. But I did have internal analyses, certainly, and writing everything down really helped. I think I'm also, again, still core introvert, still core like recluse and want to be in a tower, surrounded by books and nothing else. But I have gotten more experience with just being open with who I am, answering questions the best I can, and not having that initial, I don't know, fear, I guess, or initial worry getting stuck in my head about what are they going to think of me, of just like free form, just sort of just being and sharing.
Yeah, yeah. And having now written the book in that way, do you feel like you have kind of carried on that kind of no care is given about what people think? Like, have you carried that more into other elements of your creativity in your life, do you feel? Or
Oh, it's such a journey. All of it is such a journey. I'm still, I still sometimes wonder what people are thinking, and I know I still kind of get it wrong. I know that like I sometimes will find that like, oh, I've just said something and this person feels uncomfortable, or they're like, I don't know what to say to that, like so it's and then me being just learning to be more comfortable with being who I am and being okay if people don't get it or whatever. Um, but yeah, it's a journey. There's more meditation to be done. Yeah, and I don't think I'll ever stop, you know, uh curating outfits. I feel like outfits are part of my communication and
Mhm.
and as I go, you and I are recording this. We are not sharing any video, and yet I am dressed to the nines. I am wearing like my fabulous like leaf gold necklace, and I've got my hair up, and yeah. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but I feel fashion needs to be asserted as a communication style.
It is. I was actually going to say, going back to these I am statements, how we define ourselves. As you were examining all of like yourself essentially as a character within this these stories, I was going to ask you. You have a delightful excerpt from a blog you co-write with your sister
Mhm.
about sense, and that is the SCENTS sense.
Yes.
That go in with perfume and incorporating that. Was that that was around the time incorporating that of writing the book? Were there any other like, oh, Emily as X character that you found like, oh, I want to borrow some of like that Emily's energy into my day to day? Or how did these epiphanies of like, oh, I can express myself through this way, or this is something. How did those kind of explode out of and get incorporated into your life post book?
Yeah, and I first want to do a sort of PSA for sense.
Yeah, please do.
Because like there was this moment again, I don't remember if it was a time in which I knew what was going on or I just found out, but my body was just strange. It felt very strange. I felt these inner voids in my leg. Like and I felt empty and scared and with my husband, we were at some store and just trying different scents. And I just took this deep breath and I was like, oh, it like filled those voids for a moment. So if, for those who ever feel like you're just don't know what to do and there's just nothing that can be done, like smelling something wonderful can really, really help. So yeah, I was this was an exercise of, again, very cathartic to write everything down, but just my ways, finding ways that I can best navigate. And, part of that self is absolutely fashion. Because, if you feel like you look cool, then it's okay. Like make that cane work. It's a fashion accessory. It's not, it's not just like this medical device. It's like, pair it with something cute. So yeah, definitely tapped into my fashion as healing self.
Coming from such a tactile art like fashion and collage, when you were writing this, how did you go about incorporating? Because I have always said the book is like a multimedia. It's such a like physically felt, especially for an ebook, something that like really leaps off the page because there's so much different types of media. How did you go about bringing in these more tactile elements into your storytelling?
Yeah, it was pretty immediate because as I was going through this experience, I had so many things that were connected to it. Like, this is the paperwork I got from the doctor. This is connected to this other thing. I was even, I had to take injections into my arms and legs. And so like I got tattoos for those spaces and then took a picture. So it was kind of an immediate inclusion. I do tend to think in visual forms, and either these things existed, or I created them, or I asked for them to be created.
Did you know, because you have such specific images that go with stories, did this might be a little bit more of a chicken and egg question, but were there some times where you were writing where you would discover one of these old photos or these old collages? I know some of them were made in conjunction with the piece,
Mhm.
but did you have any that you were like, oh wow, I'm just now remembering this as I'm writing it. Can I go find this? I know that you have a tendency to keep a lot of photographs and stuff. Was there anything that you had to dig out of an old box?
Yeah, well, I definitely had to look for the train picture, but it wasn't too hard to find. I do kind of keep that one close. I was going through some of my I cross stitch, and I was going through some of my older ones, and one of the first ones that I created when I opened up my Etsy shop was this one that just said share on it, just the word
Mm-hmm.
share. And that was well before I had started writing the book. And I was like, oh, well, that feels connected. Like I don't know why I felt compelled to share, because I wasn't sharing a thing at that time. I was very introverted. So I was there something specific that I had to look for? I don't recall. I don't recall, but I did go through the archives, let's say, the boxes, and plucked things that felt they made that they were connected.
Yeah. Um, Tarot and astrology are another kind of the elements of your definitions and your path to discovery throughout this book. I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your relationship to both of those things and how they have kind of impacted you uh, throughout both the writing of this, but also just as a person going into like examining yourself through these mediums. Again, often visual mediums with tarot.
Yeah, so with tarot, it is something that has been very helpful for me. Like, I'll have tarot readings done for me, but I'll also do them for myself. Some people don't like the idea of doing tarot for themselves, but I'm very much so a fan of that. Um, I will, yeah, I still, do that. I have more too many tarot decks, and probably will have too many more, double that, as the years go on. But I will pull cards whenever I'm trying to figure out a solution to something, or just like, what do I do today? Like, what does today look like? Let me pull these things. What are concepts for me to think about? And I like having sort of this visual exercise of, what is this telling me? Like, what do I personally see in the cards, and what's the narrative? How can I connect different things? So I find that to be incredibly, incredibly helpful. With astrology, with all of these, I am just a student. I am still learning how to connect all of these things. I do, in my thank yous, thank Pluto in my list of thank yous. Or I think it's actually in my references, because Pluto is in a darker, creative, interesting space that I was absolutely trying to tap into. But um, yeah, my birth chart of planets is now tattooed to my arms and legs of where I was doing my injections for my medication. So it's all still learning all of these things, but I find it to be very helpful tools. They don't tell me who I am as a person. They don't tell me, what to do with my life, but they help inform as just like another tool, as one would have in like an art bin of you.
Yeah, obviously you give huge shout outs to Pluto. Is there any planet or uh, celestial entity that you navigate to strongest? Like, do you have a favorite planet, so to speak?
I mean, Pluto's up there. I think the concept of Chiron is fascinating. It's like, what's our deepest wound? What's the thing that just like about ourselves that's unique to ourselves that just sticks out like a sore thumb? Like you just cannot, hold your spoon in the way that everybody else holds your spoon, but the way you hold your spoon is perfectly fine and normal and great. So I find Chiron to be pretty fascinating.
Yeah. Speaking of the thank yous and the background information in the acknowledgement section of the book, within the final pages, you have about, I would say, 2.5 pages dedicated to just citing influences,
Yes.
shouting out all of these pieces of art that have really impacted and influenced you. What was your kind of process in choosing to include that list, and like how do you as an artist relate to like being inspired by other artists?
Yeah, there was things in there that like deeply inspired like a single word, and it inspired it so much. I was like, I have to put this in here. For example, I'm going to share an example. So, Absolutely Fabulous, the TV show, wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
There was an episode where the daughter Sophie is like feeling like she wasn't wanted by her mom, and her mom's just like when you came into this world, I love you. Like I just knew that you were the one, that I was going to be your mother, and it was wonderful. And then her snarky friend says something, true or whatever. However, the day after, and then she like goes into the snark about like, anyway, because the dynamic of this mother and daughter is pretty hilariously awful. But anyway, in the book, in Disease is the Mirror, there was this moment where I had this wonderful like I was experiencing this pain in my side, and it finally went away after doing a cleanse. Oh, was it that? No, no, no. Sorry, I'm mixing up events here. We thought it was a pinched nerve, and I had this like
Mm-hmm.
relief, like, oh, it's a pinched nerve. That's why I'm having this pain. That's why this is going numb. And then like the day after, I had a conversation with my nutritionist, and she's like, well, it might be like a gastrointestinal thing. And I'm like, because it was like, however, the day after, like I was just like so excited it could be resolved, but now I've got like this other completely different, unrelated to, equally plausible um issue that it could be. So yeah. So if there was like a phrase or a word that was in my brain that was a connection, like it was gonna go in there. It's particularly because this is like Emily's story that is again this level of Emily child and adult kind of speaking at once. And growing up, it's like TV and music and movies and media. It was just like how I absorbed information about the world for the most part.
Yeah, also to me it makes the novel feel, again, you and I have this conversation many times, but one of the fun things about the ebook reading experience is that images and things are linked within the ebook. And I think that that's so interesting, especially because there is a entire section, one of my favorite sections in the novel, about as you said, what it isn't, and then these kind of poetic ways that you've shared pieces of excerpts in it of this is how this is what this is. I have to define it in all of these different metaphorical ways, and one of those is in programming language, because you do have a background in design and programming. One of the things that I love is that it gives it an additional feeling of clicking these hyperlinks into your imagination and mind and experience. And it creates this, again, more living entity of reading something while also experiencing everything around it. Do you typically like, I know that I feel like it's, there's, I feel like there's a full spectrum of creatives, but I feel like I've known many creative people that are just very isolationist. They're like, no, I want it to seem like this came exclusively from my brain inside of me. And then you have a creative like yourself that is, here it is. Here's everything. Here's everything that really affected and jazzed me up during this. This is, even if a reader may not be able to necessarily tell, like, there's an essence here. How do you feel about like that dichotomy? Like, what would you say to the creatives that are, trying to do it all from inside of their own brain, I guess?
Yeah. I so with I'll use the programming language as just sort of a starting off point here. Because this whole experience, this diagnosis experience, was a mix of me having events and trying to reconcile what they all meant and learning. It was kind of, one can interpret this as all about learning about who one is and how to navigate the world. And around that time, I am a novice, very novice programmer, but was just doing some like self-taught learning for Java. And I was just like, as I'm learning this other language and I'm learning how to communicate about who I am, like how do I connect these things and help them make sense for myself? So that's kind of where that came to be. And I think I'm just one of those like staunch liberal arts college kind of people. Like I really like having multiple disciplines that I can learn from and play with. Some of them I'm better at than others, and some of them I really, have to continue to research and learn. But I remember I've been to a lot of art schools. I went to an art school for elementary school and middle school, and in high school it was like, more liberal arts based. Like I had all the disciplines, but they definitely focused on art, making sure that we at least had art classes every day. Um, but I remember thinking like, okay, after high school, I'm gonna have to, you know, pick specific classes for art. Like in high school and middle school, like you're like doing everything. You're having, today we're going to do painting, this next day we're going to do sculpture, the following day we're going to do something else. And I was kind of dreading going into a college, class, and it's just like you're only doing sculpture, you're only doing, this one way of creating. And I ended up certainly enjoying my art classes, but I just like having every possible option at your fingertips, because art can take so many forms, or just sharing information can take so many forms. Maybe it is just you're writing a program and that's what that thing needs to be. Or or you're baking a pie and that is what you're creating and that's what it is. Not everything has to be some published work out there, for it to still matter and create beauty for the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. This echoes back to something you said earlier in our conversation today, where you knew this was a book, but you love relating to your project of, what are you?
Mm-hmm.
What medium is this a sentence on my fridge? I think that's something that's really interesting. Do you find, what about something like, this may be incredibly hard to nail down, but for people that are looking to, kind of find more ways to express their creativity, who maybe aren't as good at, sensing out what name is that, do you have any advice for kind of listening to the piece to let it tell you what it is?
Yeah, if it's feeling unclear, I find if you're comfortable sharing it with others, getting a second opinion, you don't have to listen to that opinion, but it could be a tool of information. I think also if you're deciding, okay, is this a painting? Is this is this a sculpture? Is this a sentence? Is this a banana bread? Like, make those things and see which one feels right. Um, and then just, I think it's a matter of not holding one back. If I don't know what this is, why would I create it? Just create, and then it'll show you what it is.
Yeah, I love that as a an exercise too, as okay, I don't know what this is. Um, I'm going to take, I'm going to take this theme or this idea or this thing that I'm working on and do it as a collage. I'm going to do it as a sentence on my fridge. I am going to do it as the first chapter of a novel. I'm going to do it as a painting. I'm going to do it as a program. I'm going to do it as a point and click adventure game. I think
Mm-hmm.
that that is something really, really interesting. Um, what has been some of, what has been the most interesting to you um, response to, obviously you're sharing something very, very personal, and we already talked a little bit about how like, being a little still self-conscious around like, oh, what do people think of me, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been a surprising, has any of the responses been surprising to you in the way of people coming up to you and saying, oh, I saw this in the book. This is
Mm-hmm.
what it has done for me. Has there been any cool responses that you care to share?
Um, well, I've gotten some wonderful responses of people saying, this was relatable. Thank you. I really appreciate this. I have also gotten a mix of just like for people who know me. So, okay, a lot of the story takes place in Chicago, which is a
Mm-hmm.
was a challenging place for me to navigate, particularly when I was having, mobility issues before quarantine. And I ended up moving to a small town, and some of my beautiful, wonderful, I just have wonderful neighbors have read this book. And so they are attempting to reconcile this person that they're meeting today with the person that wrote this book 4 years ago. And they're like, they're like confused. Like, because I'm not working with a cane currently. And so navigating Chicago could be easier. And I'm also more open with talking about this stuff than what is described in the book. So it's been interesting to have conversations with those who are confused about who I am now, and not having met me during that time or before that time, and reading about this and trying to figure it out. Like one neighbor had a wonderful like visual. She's just like she said she was looking over at my house and just like, wait, she lives right over there, and she is sharing a lot of really private stuff. I thought that was kind of wonderful. So I I I am still figuring out how to explain that to people. I know that's not really answering your
Sure.
question, but that's a question still in my brain about how do I best communicate like all of this. It all makes sense to me. Like this journey all makes sense to me, but like how to explain who I am, because I am me, and I am me from 4 years ago, and I am me from childhood, but to others it feels very different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's always so, especially when you're sharing such a like wide spectrum of yourself. Of I love this idea of, again, going back to your mirror metaphor of, I like this idea of looking into basically an infinity of mirrors, and they all are reflecting a different piece of you, but they exist simultaneously.
Hmm.
There's not one mirror that doesn't exist there, even if it's reflecting a different color or shade or angle. They are all kind of reflecting back to this single point.
Hmm.
And that's interesting. Yeah. Is there anything, obviously you don't have to be too specific, but you mentioned earlier kind of some intention you had of like when you realized this was a book,
Hmm.
and you were like, I feel like people would really get something out of reading it. What is your hope for people that are coming to this um, without any kind of prior knowledge to the book? What would your hope be of their takeaways, if any?
Yeah. So, illness, it you can talk about illness and write about illness in so many different ways, and all of them are important. There's more medical ways where it's like this is happening because of this thing, and then you can take this medication to help with that, and it's just sort of talking in medical speak. And I am not a medical speak person. I don't have that skill set. I honor that, but respectively, like just can't do that. So it was important to me to share what does this experience look like for someone who's just going through that. And to me, it was about emotion and stories and dreams and things that are a little harder to pin down and explain. So my hope is if someone is going through, and it doesn't even have to be a medical issue, but if someone's going through like a really challenging, confusing time, that itself can be navigated through, not clear black and white answers, but through like an interesting gray space, and still, help one through that. I think also it can be helpful for those who are the caregivers or the loved ones of someone going through a challenging experience to sort of get more perspective about what that could look like from that person actually, experiencing it and trying to navigate the world. Um, so I guess, I would love for folks to, as they're reading it, just have a better understanding or appreciation for those who are going through like a challenging time, and that art and creativity can still exist in like the mundane sort of medical issues. Like you can still fantasize and have dreams and even in like a stark reality.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I know that we are going to be wrapping up our conversation here shortly. One thing I wanted to ask is, was there anything that you wanted to, any other things you wanted to discuss about the novel and the memoir that we haven't kind of touched on already?
You are a master at questions. Like I love I love what you've asked. I don't know that I have other things to share. It's just I think though, as someone who is, this is my, first published book. I've got other, little things here and there out there, art and other things. But if there's people who are interested in seeing like what that looks like to become a writer, like write things down. Like we got people like me who are just like dabbling into something new, and you don't have to have had like a full degree in it or know who people or whatever. Just start writing and start creating and start putting things out there, because all of our voices should be heard, in my opinion.
I love that. Yes, I think that many guests I've had on the show, I think that has always been a little bit of a theme that I like to touch on, is just how can we activate the creativity of everyone? And I think that in a very commodified capitalist world, we think that there has to be some kind of pedigree that comes along with being creative, when creativity is just the base level raw thing that we do as human beings. So I am so glad you said that, of just, yes, there is no prerequisite for making something.
Yes.
And that's, yeah, really, really wonderful to hear. And I hope that everyone takes that as such. And as you said, to echo back what you said earlier, of making something doesn't mean it has to end up being something that you even share with somebody or try to commodify. It can be something that is just for you. And that itself has its own power. I mean, again, starting from a place of, I have to write this down for Diseases of Mirror. I have to reflect upon these things because I need to have an understanding of what this is and how I am in this world. I think it's really, really quite something.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So to end at the beginning, I think, as you are kind of moving forward, what is on the horizon for Emily Greenquist? What is coming up for you? What are you currently working on?
Yes.
What are things that are getting you excited for the next steps in your day-to-day?
Yeah, so writing this book has awakened the writer within, so I'm continuing to write. In fact, I think by the time this recording is out, I'm going to have done a virtual night of poetry with Olivia Cronk, Philip Sorensen, and Katrina Underwood, and we'll likely have that recording at on my website, emilygreenquist.com. But yeah, I'm starting to, I think in that I will be sharing some bits and bobs from the next book that I'm writing. And you can check out writings on Broach. I'm writing on there pretty regularly, or you can just like check out emilygreenquist.com for all the kind of random videos and other things that I do.
Absolutely. Great. And Broach is linked on emilygreenquist.com, correct?
It is, yes.
Fantastic. And obviously, continuing forward, Disease and Mirror is available anywhere you get your ebooks, so you can pick it up today. You can pick it up right now if you are curious. It is a wonderful, delightful read through self-discovery and reflection, and this just wonderful, poetic, beautiful thing. So everyone, please go out there. Is there any other place that we may be able to, the best place to get to you is emilygreenquist.com, correct? That's where all of your updates are posted.
Yes, there is a contact me page, so feel free to reach out. I do send out at no regular interval emails to folks with updates, and it can sometimes include writing, includes videos that I've done. But if you're curious about getting on that mailing list, you can do that there.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this conversation with Emily Greenquist. I hope you have enjoyed the excerpts that were written and performed by Emily herself, as well as the music of the evening. And with that, we will continue on with everything more wild wizard wonderfulness here at 88.3 WZRD Chicago.